Hey everyone, I'm April, and welcome back to Legends, Lies, and Crime. Today we're uncovering a story that sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but I promise it is all disturbingly real. This is the tale of a ruthless cult leader who blended cartel violence with dark rituals, convincing his followers that murder would make them untouchable. We'll venture into the twisted world of Adolfo Constanzo and the Narcosatanists. But before we do that, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Now, let's get to the story. Our story begins in Miami, Florida on November 1st, 1962, when Adolfo Constanzo was born to Delia Aurora Gonzalez, a 15-year-old Cuban immigrant. After the death of her first husband, which was Adolfo's biological father, she moved the family to San Juan, Puerto Rico. While in San Juan, Puerto Rico, she also remarried. Now, despite being baptized as a Catholic and also serving as an altar boy at church, Adolfo's upbringing, let's say, was less than conventional. In fact, he often traveled with his mother to Haiti to learn about voodoo and began practicing voodoo alongside her. In 1972, when Adolfo was just 10 years old, the family returned to Miami, Florida. Tragedy struck again not soon after they arrived in Florida, when his stepfather died of cancer, leaving his mother as a widow for the second time around. Some years later, during his teenage years, Adolfo met a priest in Little Havana, and this priest introduced him to Palo Mayombe. Now, I'll be honest, I had never heard of this religion before researching for this video, so if I'm mispronouncing the name of the religion, please forgive me. But he met this priest of Palo Mayombe and became his apprentice. And Palo Mayombe is a religion that has Afro Cuban roots. Adolfo's mom, Delia, remarried for the third time around. And when she remarried, her new husband was not only a drug dealer, but he was also a practitioner of the Palo Mayombe religion. During his teenage years, Adolfo had multiple run ins with the law, including arrests for theft, vandalism, and shoplifting. He was also known to cruise gay bars during his teenage years, and this will become a very important note for later. After high school, he attended college for a semester, but some sources say he either dropped out, while other sources suggest that he was expelled from the school. In 1983, Adolfo pledged himself to Kadim Pembe. I'm probably mispronouncing that too, but I'll go with Kadim Pembe, which is the Palo Mayombe spirit associated with chaos and destruction, basically their equivalent of the devil. By this time, Adolfo had fully embraced the worship of darkness for power and profit. For his final initiation into the Palo Mayombe religion, his mentor took a knife and carved various symbols into his skin, sealing his devotion through ritual scarring. At the end of the ceremony, at its peak, Adolfo said, "My soul is dead. I have no God." That same year, Adolfo moved to Mexico City, where he met three men: Martin Quintana, Jorge Montes, and Omar Ochoa, and these three men would become the first of his loyal followers. This was the beginning of the Narco-Satanists. After meeting them, he began having sexual relationships with not one, but two of the men, that being Omar Ochoa as well as Martin Quintana. and he declared one as his woman and the other as his man. Together, they started a lucrative business offering spells and rituals promising good luck and protection. And these weren't your average like backyard seances or spells to get back at your cheating spouse. No, these were rituals that included animal sacrifice. And these animals usually were chickens and goats, snakes, but sometimes Adolfo also used exotic animals such as zebras and lion cubs. Later, Adolfo's journals were recovered and he had an actual price list for each type of animal. So, if someone wanted a ritual sacrifice of, for example, a rooster, roosters were $6 each, goats were $30, boa constrictors were $450, adult zebras $1,100, and lion cubs were a staggering $3,100 apiece. And sidebar, where did he get these animals? Like, aside from like chickens and goats, where do you get a lion cub? Like, do you import it? Do you steal it from the zoo? I don't know. I was just wondering though. Since his rituals involved rare and expensive animals, his clients were far from ordinary. His clients weren't your everyday Joe Schmo. Wealthy drug dealers and hitmen were drawn to the mystique and the brutality of Adolfo's ceremonies. He also claimed to use powerful magical spells that could make these hitmen and drug dealers and their bodyguards invisible to police and even bulletproof against their enemies. Some drug dealers actually scheduled their shipments and meetings dependent upon Adolfo's predictions. Hitmen and drug dealers were not Adolfo's only clients. Some of his clients were actually very high ranking officers in the Mexican police force. Now, as Adolfo's reputation grew, he began seeking more and more power. In the Palo Mayombe religion, practitioners often use something called an inganga, another thing I'm probably mispronouncing, but it's pretty much a cauldron. And the cauldron was meant to hold different elements of nature, such as soil, sticks, herbs, but also it could hold dead animal carcasses as well as human remains. Palo Mayombe is a spiritual tradition centered around communication with spirits and the forces of nature. However, Adolfo twisted these practices for his own purposes. Instead of using the rituals for guidance or protection, he turned them into tools for fear, control, and violence, convincing those around him, such as his followers, that human sacrifices would make him and them invincible. Not long after starting this business with his three original followers, Adolfo had over 30 well paying clients, and they paid so well that he was able to buy an $80,000 Mercedes Benz as well as a $60,000 condo in the center of Mexico City. This is when Adolfo and the Narcosatanists decide to turn their ritual sacrifice up a notch. Instead of just sacrificing animals such as snakes and chickens and zebras and lion cubs, they decided that they needed bones. They needed some type of human remains. So they began raiding cemeteries in order to get those bones to add to the cauldron. In 1986, Adolfo was introduced to members of the Calzada crime family and started selling them his services such as fortune telling. The Calzada family was an independent drug trafficking organization with deep ties to the international drug trafficking network. He came to believe that the cartels and drug dealers such as them, they should attribute their success to him. Adolfo had a belief that when drug dealers weren't caught, or when their shipments went through, or when they weren't stopped by the police, it was because of him and his rituals. So he believed that these people that he sold rituals to, they should thank him, that they were successful in their business dealings because of him and because of him only. In the following year, with this confidence and I guess you could say arrogance, Adolfo approached the Calzada family and demanded that they make him a full business partner, to which they obviously refused. A few weeks later, 7 members of the Calzada family suddenly disappeared. A week later, the bodies of the 7 members of the Calzada family were found in a lake, and they were found horrifically mutilated. Several bodies were missing toes, ears, fingers, even brains and spines. I would guess these were ghastly trophies that were thrown into Adolfo's cauldron. And this gruesome act, these gruesome murders, also served as a warning to others to not cross him. As I said, Adolfo was confident as well as emboldened by getting away with all of these crimes, such as drug dealing and the murder of, or murders rather, of several members of the Calzada family. And because he was so emboldened and confident, one time he actually posed as a DEA agent and went up against a cocaine dealer from Guadalajara, Mexico, stole that cocaine from him, and then sold it through his police connections for $100,000. Now, Sarah is probably the last person you would expect to get wrapped up with Adolfo Constanzo. Sarah Alduarte was born on September 6, 1964, in Matamoros, Mexico. And she was a great student and she had a bright future ahead of her. But while she was excelling at school, her personal life was a bit messy. She actually married a man from Brownsville, Texas, who was 11 years her senior. But just 5 months after they got married, they broke up. After the breakup, Sarah went back to living with her parents, and she also began dating a man named Gilberto Sosa. He was a drug dealer who was linked to the powerful Hernandez brothers, who were connected to the Gulf Cartel. And this is when Adolfo and Sarah crossed paths. On July 30th, 1987, Sarah was driving and a brand new shiny Mercedes Benz cut her off in traffic. The driver was smooth and charming, and he introduced himself as Adolfo Constanzo. She was instantly drawn to him. Now, I'm sure you probably guessed this was not a meeting of chance or some random almost accident. This was very much on purpose, and Adolfo had a plan. You see, Adolfo had been keeping tabs on Sarah's boyfriend, Gilberto, and his cartel connections. And this meeting of Sarah and Adolfo was completely staged. A few weeks later, Adolfo made his move. He met up with Sarah and Gilberto in Brownsville, Texas. And when he met them, he made a point of refusing to shake Gilberto's hand. And this was the ultimate power move. Not long after, an anonymous caller, and spoiler alert, that caller was probably Adolfo or one of his followers. But an anonymous caller gave Gilberto a call and said, "Oh, your girl Sarah? Yeah, she's cheating on you. She's dating someone else." So Gilberto broke up with Sarah right there immediately. And what did Sarah do? She ran into the arms, into the comfort of Adolfo. Sarah and Adolfo were romantically involved for a period of time, but that period of time was very brief because Adolfo told Sarah that he actually preferred men, and Sarah came to accept that. So, although their relationship didn't stick, what did stick is in Sarah's newfound obsession and fascination with the occult. By the end of the summer of 1987, Sarah's family and friends noticed a dramatic turn in her personality. The once bright and bubbly college student suddenly became fascinated with witchcraft, magic, and the power of the occult. She had fully embraced Adolfo's thoughts and spiritual philosophy. To Adolfo's followers, Sarah became the godmother, or la madrina, second only to the godfather himself, El Padrino, Adolfo Costanzo. But Adolfo wasn't just interested in Sarah's loyalty, he was playing the long game. He leveraged Sarah's connections to the infamous Hernandez brothers, confidently predicting that Elio Hernandez would soon come to her asking for advice. And when this actually came true, she believed in him even more, and soon after introduced Adolfo to the Hernandez brothers. Through this relationship with the Hernandez brothers, he expanded the cult's operations, integrating the ritualistic practices with large scale drug trafficking. Sarah was instrumental in recruiting new members and maintaining the cult's operations, especially while Adolfo was away smuggling drugs across the American Mexican border. As typically seen in many cults, they tend to self isolate to be away from the prying eyes of law enforcement and the public. Because, it definitely is easier to run drugs or murder people if you're isolated from general society. So in 1988, the cult relocated to Rancho Santa Elena, a ranch in the desert. The house or the ranch in the desert served as a storage site for massive quantities of cocaine and marijuana. This remote location also became the backdrop for even more heinous murders, often targeting rival drug dealers. Costanzo was even known to murder some of his own followers. For example, in November of 1988, the 35-year-old ex-cop, who was also a cult member, named Jorge Valente, he broke El Padrino's or Adolfo's rule of not using drugs. And because he broke the rules, he had to be punished. As punishment, Jorge became the cult's next human ritual sacrifice, a brutal demonstration of Adolfo's demand for total obedience. Adolfo became even more focused on human ritual sacrifice. But because many of those people were homeless, prostitutes, or rival drug dealers, their disappearances mostly went unnoticed and unanswered for. Adolfo was absolutely bloodthirsty. He even told his followers, "Bring me someone I can use. Bring me someone who will scream." March 13th, 1989 marked a turning point for Adolfo. You see, the day before, he actually kidnapped and sacrificed someone, but he felt that they hadn't suffered enough. So he wanted someone else to sacrifice to ensure that his latest shipment of 800 kilograms of marijuana made it over the US border. So this time around, Adolfo's henchmen kidnapped a young man named Mark Kilroy, who was a student from Texas enjoying spring break. But unlike his previous victims, this disappearance did not go unnoticed. What Adolfo did not count on is that Mark Kilroy came from a very well off family in Texas, and they offered a reward for any information leading to the whereabouts of Mark Kilroy. Mark's disappearance led to significant attention from the U.S. authorities, and the U.S. authorities pressured or tried to pressure the Mexican authorities for some answers. And initially, four narco Satanists were arrested. In April, a narco Satanist named Serafin Hernandez Garcia refused to stop at a checkpoint. Supposedly, he had believed that he was protected and he had invisibility due to some spell that Costanzo cast on him. Hernandez was followed by local police back to the ranch, back to Rancho Santa Elena. The police formed a search of the ranch and found large amounts of drugs as well as several firearms stored there, and arrested Hernandez as well as another drug dealer who was in the cult named David Cerner Valdez. While in custody, Hernandez confessed to aiding in the kidnapping and murder of Mark Kilroy. At the ranch, the Mexican authorities found 15 mutilated bodies, including Mark Kilroy's, and they also found human remains in Adolfo's cauldron as well. It turns out that Mark Kilroy was actually abducted outside of a bar where Adolfo and his henchmen took him back to the ranch. Mark was killed when he tried to escape from the ranch, and Adolfo caught him and hit him in the back of the neck with a machete. After killing him, Adolfo even removed Mark's brain from his body to boil it in his cauldron.
Garcia's, just steps from the Texas-Mexico border, is one of the most famous tourist stops in Matamoros. It was one of the last places, too, that friends remember seeing Mark Kilroy.
Authorities say that Mark Kilroy was grabbed somewhere near here by satanic cult members who motioned him towards their car. Signed confessions from some of the suspects reveal that at one point Mark was able to escape into the streets of this town, but that he was recaptured and taken to the Santa Elena Ranch.
25 miles into Mexico, the shallow graves of a dozen found, 2 still buried, tell the story of a drug-dealing cult led by a Cuban godfather. Inside a small shack, ritualistic candles and reminders of torture. Outside, a cauldron that authorities say was filled with human brain matter, blood, and animal parts.
I cannot understand how somebody can just tell somebody else pick him up and go kill him. I have a hard time personally recognizing it. I can't believe it can be done.
Authorities believe Mark and the others were victims of a group that transported some 1,000 pounds of marijuana into Texas each week, that the Cuban padrino or godfather was possibly linked to a form of voodoo, Santeria, practiced in the Caribbean.
Evidenced by a lot of the physical characteristics of the crime involved, feathers, the type of things they went through and the different rituals that they had.
Most of what authorities know now comes from 4 suspects paraded before a gallery of cameras today. One showed off 6 ceremonial marks, each for a killing. The men, seemingly without remorse, all talked about a cult that killed to please its godfather, that abducted Kilroy because the godfather wanted an Anglo, part of the spring break crowd. Here in Mexico, where there is no death penalty, these men can at most receive a prison sentence of 50 years for murder. Here, too, in Mexico, news of the slayings worries some mothers, one of whom told reporters her son is missing and she fears a victim of the same fate. Shelley Koffler, Channel 5 News, in Brownsville.
The discoveries at the ranch were so heinous and unbelievable that it even made international news. Geraldo Rivera aired a special primetime segment about the case, and journalists flew in from the United States, Europe, and even Japan. Despite uncovering the gruesome truth of Mark Kilroy's murder, Adolfo had already vanished, slipping away before authorities could catch him.
Yesterday, authorities watched guard as one of the suspects unearthed the shallow grave of the 13th body, a 14-year-old Mexican bound, gagged, and executed. Today, authorities had hoped to bring in heavy U.S. equipment to completely dig up the Santa Elena Ranch, but the equipment never arrived.
Authorities say that insurance problems are part of the reason that the U.S. equipment did not pass through this border stop. They say that the owners of the expensive earth movers were concerned about leaving their equipment in Mexico unprotected overnight.
In the meantime, authorities continue their search in both Mexico and the United States for two key suspects, Sarah Aldrete, the cult godmother, and 26-year-old Cuban-American Adolfo Constanzo, the suspected ringleader. License plates on Constanzo's 1989 Mercedes traced to the Brownsville address of suspect Serafin Hernandez, already in custody. Today, U.S. Customs agent Oren Nex said Serafin Hernandez has admitted to killing one of the dismembered victims, identified for the first time as Gilbert Sosa, a U.S. citizen from the Brownsville area.
Adolfo fled to an apartment in Mexico City with a few loyalists, including Sarah. On May 6, 1989, nearly 2 months after the abduction and murder of Mark Kilroy, police were going door to door knocking, looking for a missing child. Although the missing child case was completely unrelated, Adolfo was paranoid because he was on the run. So when he saw the police coming, he was nervous and paranoid and decided to open fire on the police with a machine gun. Firing that machine gun led to a prolonged standoff that lasted 45 minutes and 180 officers were involved. Adolfo realized that he was cornered and outnumbered. He realized that there was no escape. So he handed his gun to one of his followers named Alvaro de Leon Valdez and ordered Alvaro to kill him, as well as one of his other followers named Martin Quintana. You probably remember Martin Quintana because he is one of the original followers that Adolfo met when he first moved to Mexico City, and the one of the followers that he also had a romantic relationship with as well. Alvaro complied, and when the police finally stormed the apartment, they found Adolfo Constanzo and Martin Quintana both dead. Alvaro confessed to shooting Costanzo and told police the Godfather will not be dead long. Sarah and other cult members were arrested at the apartment as well. About 14 cult members were arrested and charged with various crimes ranging from murder to drug trafficking to obstruction of justice. Alvaro, the one who actually shot Adolfo, was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Sarah and the Hernandez brothers were convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to 60 years in prison each. Unfortunately, no one was ever tried or convicted for the murder of Mark Kilroy, but the U.S. authorities have vowed that if Sarah is ever released from prison, that she will be tried for the murder of Mark Kilroy.
The windows as police surrounded the place. Captured suspects say as the shooting began, leader Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo ordered his own death and that of his closest companion at the gun of fellow gang member Alvaro de Leon Valdez. Mexican authorities identified the dead men, but now a DEA official wants fingerprint verification from Constanzo's hometown of Miami. Sunday, the cult's alleged priestess denied taking part in sacrificial murders and apologized to the parents of slain Santa Fe College student Mark Kilroy.
I'm sorry. If I wouldn't know that it was like this, I wouldn't be in it.
De Leon says he killed only people who were out to kill him.
It is reported that between the years of 1986 and 1989, Adolfo Constanzo and the Narcosatanists were confirmed to have murdered 16 people, with some investigators putting that number as high as 26 murders. Adolfo Constanzo's gruesome blend of cartel violence and twisted religious rituals left a lasting mark on both criminal and cult history. It's crucial to understand that while Adolfo used Palo Mayombe as his religion, it was a twisted, weird perversion of the actual religion. The Palo Mayombe religion itself has Afro-Cuban spiritual roots, but Adolfo twisted this religion for his own power, control, and to commit murder. His cult, the Narcosatanists, stands as a great example of what happens when you mix blind devotion, greed, and superstition. Even today, His story remains a chilling reminder of how charismatic figures can manipulate beliefs to commit horrifying crimes. Alrighty, so that's pretty much the end of the story about Adolfo and the Narcosatanists. But I'll tell you the part that I find most disturbing is that there were actually former police officers who were a part of his cult. Adolfo also had connections to high ranking officers, but no one bothered to do anything to stop him. Even after he killed 7 members of the Calzada family, I know that they were also in drug trafficking, but I would think the murder of 7 people in one family would be a bigger deal than it was. But it seems like no one cared to do anything to stop him until the US authorities got involved because of the disappearance and then subsequent murder of Mark Kilroy. So I really hate to think that if he didn't, abduct an American or someone from a foreign country, and therefore a foreign entity got involved, what would have happened? How much longer would this have gone on? So, what do you think? Was Adolfo Constanzo a true believer in the Palo Mayombe religion, or was he just a sadistic con man who used the religion to commit twisted, horrendous crimes? So, let me know how you feel about Adolfo and the narco Satanists. Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear and read your thoughts. And if you have any ideas for similar videos about cults and cult history or just like true crime, please let me know because I'm always on the lookout for great topics for upcoming videos. If you found this video exciting, informative, downright terrifying because it was, please make sure to like the video, turn on notifications, and subscribe to the channel because it's free. And like, how many things in life are free nowadays, right? But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Legends, Lies, and Crime.